Have you ever wondered why being alone feels so heavy for most women, but freeing for a few? Why some women break down in silence while others rise in it? It's not just circumstance, it's mindset. Most people think being alone is a weakness, a sign of failure, or something to escape. But what if I told you that being alone is actually a hidden superpower, and the real reason most women never unlock it is because they've been trained not to? See, from the time you were a little girl, the world told you that your worth depends on who accepts you, that your happiness is tied to a relationship, a circle of friends, a family, a man, a job. You were taught to chase connection, even when it cost you your peace, to keep people around, even when they didn't value you. You were told that being alone means something is wrong with you, that you're not lovable, that you're behind. So you clung to people, to attention, to anything that made you feel needed, even when deep down it made you feel invisible. But what if everything you were told was a lie? What if solitude wasn't something to run from, but something to run toward? Or what if your greatest version isn't found in noise, but in silence? Here's the truth. Being alone doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous in the best way. Because the woman who can stand alone is the woman who doesn't settle. She's not hungry for approval. She's not chasing attention. She's not bending to be liked. She knows who she is. And that terrifies the world. People can't control the woman who isn't afraid to walk alone. They can't guilt her. They can't use her because she doesn't rely on them to feel whole. That kind of woman is rare. That kind of woman is powerful. That kind of woman isn't easy to manipulate. And that's exactly why most systems, people, and influences try to keep women dependent on love, on validation, on being seen. Because when a woman stands alone, she doesn't just become strong. She becomes unstoppable. But very few women ever reach that place, not because they can't, but because they never learn how to be alone without feeling broken. They confuse loneliness with isolation. They think silence means emptiness, but in truth, silence is where you meet yourself. It's where you heal. It's where you grow. Being alone forces you to listen to the thoughts you've been avoiding. It teaches you to face your fears instead of running into distractions. It strips you down to who you really are, and if you let it, it rebuilds you stronger than ever. This kind of solitude isn't punishment, it's preparation. The woman who learns to enjoy her own company is no longer desperate to be invited. She doesn't beg for attention. She doesn't shrink for love. She's whole on her own. And that's rare. That's magnetic. That's real power. If you've ever felt like being alone makes you less, let this be the wake-up call your soul has been waiting for. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not unworthy. You are simply in the season where your strength is being built in private. And the longer you sit with yourself, the louder your purpose will speak. Keep watching till the end, because once you understand how to use solitude as your superpower, you'll stop fearing it. You'll start craving it. Because the woman who learns to stand alone eventually stands above. From the moment a girl learns how to speak, the world starts shaping her story. Be kind. Be quiet. Be chosen. Smile more. Don't be too loud. Don't be too strong. She's fed these rules through fairy tales, family expectations, and social pressure. Slowly, she starts to believe her value is tied to how others feel about her, that her worth is measured in how many people love her, want her, or accept her. And just like that, the fear of being alone gets planted deep inside. Psychology proves this conditioning runs deep. Human beings naturally crave connection, but when connection becomes a requirement for identity, it becomes a cage. Most women never question it. They get stuck in patterns of chasing approval, constantly needing someone to validate their existence. It's exhausting, it's painful, and worst of all, it's silent. Because no one teaches women that it's okay to be alone. That alone doesn't mean unworthy. It means untouched, undistracted, and undefeated. This fear of solitude is not a reflection of weakness. It's a reflection of conditioning. When you've been told your whole life to attach your value to others, of course the idea of standing alone feels terrifying. But here's the truth most never realize. The longer you stay afraid of being alone, the longer you remain easy to control. You'll keep accepting less, tolerating disrespect, staying in toxic spaces, just to avoid sitting with yourself. But real growth begins the moment you stop running. When you choose solitude instead of fearing it, you're not rejecting the world, you're reclaiming yourself. You begin to see that peace is more powerful than attention, that silence is more healing than constant noise, that being alone doesn't make you forgotten, it makes you focused. And the most focused woman in the room is always the most dangerous one. There's a reason the most powerful transformations happen in silence. When a woman learns to sit alone without reaching for distractions, she begins to unlock something unshakable, She realizes that her peace doesn't come from other people, it comes from within. And that moment, that shift, changes everything. Because once you experience peace that's not dependent on someone else's presence, you stop begging for people to stay. You stop negotiating with your own value. You stop fearing empty rooms. Being alone becomes a mirror. It shows you who you really are without the influence of anyone else. No filters, no performance, just truth. And that truth might be uncomfortable at first. You'll face insecurities you've hidden under compliments. You'll confront fears you've ignored through busy schedules. You'll see your raw self. And maybe, for the first time, you'll meet the version of you that's been buried under everyone else's expectations. That's not loneliness. That's liberation. Because once you meet yourself fully, you stop tolerating halfway love. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into shallow spaces. You become too grounded to be shaken by opinions, too rooted to be moved by noise. And people will feel that shift. They'll notice the way you move differently. Not loud, not desperate, just sure. The world often misunderstands this kind of woman. They say she's distant, cold, guarded, but what they don't see is the depth behind her silence, the strength behind her softness, the fire behind her calm. She's not disconnected, she's just connected to something deeper than the surface. She's not waiting to be chosen. She's already chosen herself. And that's the kind of energy that doesn't chase, it attracts. That's the kind of presence that doesn't fade, it echoes. When you learn to love your own space, you stop depending on others to make you feel alive. You stop searching for happiness in hands that once dropped you. You stop trying to find yourself in people who never knew how to hold you. Instead, you build a world within you that no one can touch. A world where your peace is not borrowed, your confidence is not shaken, and your power is not up for negotiation. This is what most women miss. They rush to fill silence with noise. They jump from one connection to another, hoping the next person will fix what the last one broke. But healing doesn't work like that. Growth doesn't come from running, it comes from pausing, sitting still, looking inward. When you avoid being alone, you avoid your own transformation. But when you finally stop running, you begin to rebuild. You create boundaries where there used to be desperation. You build standards where there used to be people-pleasing. You start choosing peace over pressure, solitude over fake support, self-respect over shallow love. You don't just become stronger, you become untouchable. Because the woman who is at peace with herself cannot be shaken by temporary people. She doesn't need to prove herself. She doesn't fight to be seen. Her presence speaks louder than her words. And people notice. They may not understand it, but they feel it. That quiet power, that rare calm, that certainty that only comes from mastering the art of being alone. It's not about pushing the world away. It's about coming home to yourself. And when you do, you realize that being alone never meant you were lacking. It meant you were rising. It meant you were discovering the version of you that's been waiting beneath the noise. The version that doesn't settle. The version that doesn't chase. The version that finally understands. Your power was never out there, was always in you. Every time you choose yourself, you become harder to manipulate. You become immune to the games, the guilt, and the pressure to be someone you're not. That's the gift of being alone. It teaches you how to live without needing constant reassurance. It shows you that your emotions are valid, even if no one else understands them. And when you stop outsourcing your self-worth, no one can use love, attention, or silence as a weapon against you. Most women don't realize how often they're being emotionally controlled. They stay in toxic friendships because they're afraid of being left out. They tolerate bad relationships because they fear being single. They say yes when they want to say no just to avoid disappointing someone. But when you've learned to be alone and truly be okay with it, those fears fade. You no longer trade your peace for approval. You don't compromise your values for company. You understand that walking away is not loss, it's alignment. This kind of self-trust doesn't come from books or advice. It comes from solitude, from sitting with your own thoughts and learning how to stand by them, from making decisions without needing someone to agree first, from validating your own pain, your own dreams, your own worth, without waiting for a crowd to confirm it. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. Being alone feels like silence when you're used to noise. It feels like a void when you're used to filling every moment. But keep going, because on the other side of that silence is strength. Not loud, not aggressive, just steady, unmovable. That kind of strength can't be shaken by rejection. It doesn't flinch when someone pulls away, because it knows something most people don't. Peace doesn't come from being surrounded. It comes from being whole. And when you finally understand that being alone isn't scary anymore, it becomes sacred. The moment you stop depending on the world to define you, You begin to create yourself. And the space where that creation happens is solitude. It's where the noise fades, the distractions die down, and the truth becomes clear. You realize what you actually want, not what you were told to want. You stop chasing the life others painted for you, and you start designing one that feels like home. That shift is powerful, because now your decisions aren't based on fear, pressure, or comparison. They're rooted in clarity. This is where self-worth is built, not through compliments, not through someone choosing you, but through the quiet realization that you are already enough. You don't need to be more, do more, or prove more just to feel worthy. That feeling doesn't come from applause, it comes from awareness. And that awareness is only found when you spend time with yourself, undistracted and unfiltered. Too often, women tie their identity to the roles they play for others, the caregiver, the supporter, the partner. But who are you when you're not performing for anyone? That's the question solitude answers. It introduces you to the version of you that doesn't need to earn love to deserve it, that doesn't need to sacrifice her voice to keep peace, that doesn't shrink herself to be accepted. She simply exists, confident, calm, and complete. And once you know her, you don't go back. You stop pretending. You stop overgiving. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You begin to live from a place of fullness instead of fear. That's when people start noticing. Not because you're louder, but because you're rooted. There's a calm power in a woman who knows who she is. Not because the world told her, but because she spent enough time alone to find out for herself. When you no longer fear being alone, you start living with intention. You stop moving out of habit and begin moving with purpose. You no longer wake up just to survive the day. You rise to shape it. That shift happens when your mind is clear, your heart is steady, and your soul is no longer begging for outside validation. Solitude becomes your strength because it teaches you how to lead yourself. And the woman who can lead herself never gets lost in someone else's shadow. You begin to set boundaries that protect your peace instead of pleasing others. You stop giving people the power to control your emotions. Their silence doesn't shake you. Their judgment doesn't define you. Their absence doesn't destroy you. Because your inner world is no longer reacting to their behavior. It's responding to your values. That's emotional maturity. That's real power. Not the kind that controls others, but the kind that frees you from needing their control in the first place. This is how women rise quietly. They don't scream for attention. They don't beg to be seen. They simply become so solid within themselves that the right people are drawn to them, and the wrong ones fall away. No force, no drama, just alignment. Because a woman who has spent time alone knows her energy is sacred. She doesn't offer it carelessly. She doesn't chase what confuses her. She understands that anything causing inner chaos isn't meant for her peace. This clarity only comes through solitude. It's not a punishment. It's a reset. It's where you clear out the noise, the pain, the pressure. It's where you unlearn the lies and remember the truth. And the truth is, you were never missing anything. You were just disconnected from yourself. But now, you're waking up. You're grounding in your power. You're finally seeing that being alone was never the problem. It was the path. The world teaches women to seek connection before clarity, to find a relationship before finding themselves, to fill the silence instead of listening to it. But here's the truth they don't often say. Until you are comfortable being alone, every connection you make will be based on fear. Fear of being unwanted, fear of being left behind, fear of not being enough. And anything built on fear will always feel unstable. It will make you doubt your voice. It will make you question your worth. It will make you accept less than you deserve. But when you've sat with yourself long enough, that fear fades. You're not connecting from emptiness anymore. You're connecting from overflow. You know who you are. You've faced your insecurities. You've felt your pain. You've learned how to soothe your own soul without needing someone else to do it for you. That's not independence out of pride. It's independence out of healing. And when a healed woman connects, it's no longer out of need. It's out of choice. This changes everything. You no longer cling to people who can't meet you where you are. You don't try to fix others just to feel needed. You don't lose yourself in relationships because you finally know how to hold on to your identity. Solitude taught you how to be whole, and now you only accept energy that matches that wholeness. No more chaos, no more confusion, just calm, just clarity, just alignment. And that kind of energy is magnetic, because people can feel when you're not desperate. They can sense when you're not performing. They recognize that quiet strength even if they can't explain it. You move different. You speak different. You carry yourself like someone who no longer fears losing others, because you've already found yourself. And once you've found that kind of power, you'll never settle for anything less. Most people confuse being alone with being lonely, but they are not the same. Loneliness is a feeling of lack. It's the ache for connection, even in a crowded room. But being alone when chosen is something completely different. It's not emptiness. It's space. Space to breathe. Space to reflect. Space to grow. And that space becomes sacred when you learn how to use it, not to escape life, but to rebuild yourself from the inside out. When a woman masters the art of being alone, she begins to trust her own voice, not the one shaped by expectations, but the one buried underneath them. The voice that knows what she needs. The voice that tells her when to rest, when to let go, when to rise. In that silence, her intuition sharpens. Her energy becomes focused. She no longer reacts to the noise around her because she's tuned into the truth within her. That's where her confidence comes from. Not from applause, not from attention, but from alignment. The world may not always celebrate this kind of woman. She's misunderstood, called distant, called intimidating. But what she really is clear. She's not trying to fit in. She's not trying to prove anything. She's not playing a role just to be accepted. She's living from a place of truth, and that kind of authenticity naturally separates her from anything fake, forced, or fragile. And that's why her solitude becomes her superpower. Because she no longer fears being by herself. She welcomes it. She uses it. She grows in it. And from that space, she becomes the kind of woman who doesn't just survive. She builds. She creates. She leads. Her life isn't about being chosen anymore. It's about choosing herself. Fully, fiercely, and without apology. That's not weakness. That's mastery. When you choose solitude, you choose growth over comfort. Because it's in the quiet moments away from the noise that real change begins. You start to see patterns, where you've settled, where you've sacrificed, where you've silenced yourself just to keep the peace. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's where transformation starts. Not from blaming others, but from taking full ownership of your life. From realizing that healing isn't about changing the world around you. It's about changing the relationship you have with yourself. There's a different kind of power in a woman who's done the inner work. She doesn't need loud entrances. She doesn't chase closure. She doesn't explain herself just to be understood. She has faced her own chaos, sat in her own silence, and come out the other side stronger, softer, wiser. That strength doesn't scream. It radiates. It's the kind of energy that speaks before she does. Calm, collected, unshaken. And what's most powerful is that she no longer needs people to complete her. She only welcomes those who add to her peace. She no longer feels guilty for walking away from what drains her. She understands that protecting her space is not selfish, it's necessary. Because now she knows her value. Not because someone else told her, but because she discovered it when no one was around. That self-worth didn't come from attention, affection, or applause. It came from solitude. It came from facing herself fully and choosing to love what she found. This is what freedom looks like. Not the absence of people, but the absence of dependence. Not the rejection of love, but the rejection of settling. When you reach this level of clarity, your life shifts. You attract better, you expect more, you tolerate less. And all of it started the moment you stopped fearing being alone and started using it as your greatest advantage. When you reach the point where your peace matters more than proving yourself, everything changes. You stop over-explaining. You stop trying to convince people of your worth. You no longer need everyone to agree with your decisions because you've made peace with your truth. That inner stillness becomes your compass. It leads you away from chaos and pulls you toward clarity. And with that clarity comes a deep, quiet confidence that no one can take away from you. You begin to realize how much energy you once spent trying to be understood, trying to be liked, trying to be everything for everyone. But the version of you who thrives in solitude knows better. She knows that acceptance that costs you your peace is too expensive. She knows that validation from others loses its meaning if it requires you to abandon yourself. And she no longer negotiates her boundaries just to keep people around. Because she's no longer afraid of being alone, she knows it's where she finds her strength. This strength doesn't look like arrogance. It looks like presence. The ability to sit with discomfort and not run from it. The willingness to face rejection and not let it define you. The courage to say no without guilt and walk away without regret. This kind of strength is born from stillness. It's born from the quiet moments no one else sees. When you choose yourself in silence, when you rise without applause. And because of that, your life becomes lighter, simpler, more focused. You stop forcing what doesn't flow. You stop begging for what doesn't belong. You begin to trust the rhythm of your own journey. You stop chasing and start aligning. And it's in this alignment that you discover the deepest truth. Being alone doesn't mean you're lacking. It means you're finally whole. Once you feel whole on your own, you stop settling for half-hearted love, shallow conversations, and surface-level connections. You no longer crave people who make you question your worth. Instead, you attract those who respect your energy, who meet you with the same depth you give, and who understand that your solitude isn't a weakness. It's your foundation. Because when you've built yourself in silence, you stop letting others shake your foundation with noise. You no longer confuse attachment with love. You've learned the difference between being wanted and being valued. And that lesson didn't come from someone teaching it to you. It came from you sitting alone with your own heartbreak, your own silence, and your own healing. That's why your heart is wiser now. Not harder, just wiser. It knows not to chase. It knows not to beg. It knows that anything real doesn't require you to lose yourself. Being alone teaches you patience. You no longer rush into connections out of fear. You wait. You observe. You trust your intuition. You'd rather be alone with peace than surrounded by noise that steals your joy. And that choice, that discipline, becomes your power. It's a silent kind of strength, but it speaks volumes. It tells the world you are no longer available for anything that dims your light. This is what self-respect looks like. It's not loud. It's not defensive. It's not reactive. It's steady. It's consistent. It's rooted in knowing your value and not needing anyone else to confirm it. And that mindset, it changes how you walk, how you speak, how you choose. It's the kind of mindset that doesn't chase love. It attracts it. Because when a woman is content with who she is, she becomes unforgettable. Not because she tries to be, but because her peace speaks louder than her presence ever could. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels full of clarity, full of strength, full of the kind of wisdom you can only earn by sitting still long enough to hear your own voice. That's what solitude gives you. It's not a punishment. It's not loneliness. It's power. Because in that space, you begin to separate who you truly are from who the world told you to be. And once you make that distinction, your life begins to transform. You stop asking for permission to live your truth. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You no longer need to explain your boundaries or soften your standards. You just live in alignment. And when you live in alignment, you stop attracting chaos. You stop repeating lessons. You stop settling for people who love the idea of you but can't hold space for the real you. Because now you're not just aware, you're awake. Being alone taught you that your peace is sacred, that not everyone deserves access to your energy, that your time is valuable, your heart is rare, and your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. And when you finally embody that truth, the world responds differently. You no longer fight to be seen. You become the one who chooses who gets close, not from bitterness, but from wisdom. Not because you fear connection, but because you now understand the cost of inviting in the wrong kind of energy. This is the essence of real power, not the ability to control others, but the ability to control yourself, to choose peace over noise, depth over distraction, purpose over people-pleasing. And that level of control doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. From every moment you sat with your pain instead of avoiding it. From every time you chose growth over comfort. That's what solitude gave you. A version of you that no longer breaks just because something or someone walked away. Once you've built yourself in silence, nothing external can define your worth anymore. You no longer need approval to feel valuable. You don't wait for someone to choose you before you believe you're enough. That's the beauty of doing the inner work. It rewrites the way you see yourself. And when your identity is no longer built on how others treat you, you gain a freedom most people never taste. A freedom rooted in self-trust. A freedom grounded in truth. The world constantly tells women to be softer, quieter, smaller, to fit in, to blend. But when you've learned to stand alone, you no longer ask the world for permission to exist loudly. You show up as you are, without apology. Because you've realized the most powerful thing a woman can be is fully herself. Not a watered-down version, not a mirror of what others expect, but the real, raw, unfiltered truth of who she is. That truth comes with strength. The kind that doesn't need validation, the kind that can walk away from comfort and still feel whole. You're no longer afraid to leave the table when respect is no longer being served. You're no longer afraid to walk paths alone, because you've already proven to yourself that you can. And that self-proof is stronger than any compliment, any praise, any temporary connection. Being alone gave you something far more valuable than attention. It gave you peace. And peace isn't passive. Peace is powerful. It's the quiet knowing that you're on the right path, even when it's unfamiliar. It's the inner calm that doesn't get shaken by rejection, failure, or judgment. Because now, you don't live for approval. You live from purpose. And purpose doesn't require a crowd. It just requires courage. The kind of courage that grows in solitude and turns into a fire that no one else can put out. When you stop seeking permission to be yourself, you start becoming unstoppable. You no longer need people to agree with your journey. You no longer second-guess your steps just because someone else can't understand them. You trust your pace even when it's slow. You trust your silence even when it's misunderstood. Because you've learned that not everything sacred is loud, and not every victory needs to be seen. Some of the greatest transformations happen behind closed doors. In the moments when you choose yourself quietly and consistently. There's something magnetic about a woman who doesn't chase, doesn't compete, doesn't perform. She simply lives in her truth, and that truth draws in everything aligned with it. That's the reward of solitude. It helps you become so rooted in who you are that you stop being shaken by who leaves or who stays. You stop measuring your worth by someone's attention span. You stop tying your value to temporary feelings or inconsistent people. And instead, you stand firm, steady, unapologetic. You realize that healing isn't loud, it's not always pretty, but it is powerful. Because every time you choose peace over reaction, you rise a little higher. Every time you choose stillness over chaos, you take back a piece of yourself. And piece by piece, you rebuild the kind of life that doesn't crumble when things fall apart. Because now you're the one holding it together, not from fear, but from strength. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone anymore. You don't need to be chosen to feel valuable. You are not someone's maybe. You are your own yes. That is the real power of being alone. It teaches you to be your own source of love, your own protector, your own guide. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you'll never shrink again just to fit into places you've outgrown. There's a moment in every woman's life when she stops waiting. She stops waiting for someone to make her feel seen. She stops waiting for someone to validate her choices, her dreams, her voice. She realizes that every time she waited, she was giving away her power. And when that realization hits, something shifts. She takes it all back. Her energy, her focus, her worth. And from that point on, she doesn't ask for space. She creates it. You start to understand that your life doesn't need to fit anyone's timeline. That healing doesn't have a deadline, that growth isn't a race. You no longer rush into relationships out of fear of being alone. You no longer entertain people just to fill a void. Because now the silence you once feared has become your sanctuary. It's in that quiet that you've found your strength, your clarity, your voice. And that voice no longer whispers, it speaks with intention, with purpose, with power. When you're no longer afraid to be alone, your standards rise. You don't lower your values to keep someone around. You don't silence your needs to make others comfortable. You don't compromise your peace just to be accepted. Because now, your peace is non-negotiable. It's your highest priority. It's the filter you use for every decision, every relationship, every path forward. And the most powerful thing about it? You're no longer driven by fear. You're driven by alignment. You don't force. You flow. You don't chase. You attract. You don't beg. You choose. That's what happens when a woman understands her worth deeply. She stops asking for less and starts living like she deserves more. Because she does. And the world starts to mirror back the energy she now carries. Strong, grounded, untouchable. When you begin to walk in your own direction, you'll notice something unexpected. Not everyone will cheer for you. In fact, some will fall away. Some will question you. Others will try to make you doubt yourself. But here's the truth. The path to self-respect is often a lonely one at first. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're finally doing what's right for you. And not everyone benefits from your awakening. This is where being alone becomes your greatest asset. Because it teaches you how to keep moving without applause. How to keep trusting your choices even when they're misunderstood. You stop looking around for confirmation, and you start looking within for conviction. That's a mindset shift most people never make, because it requires courage. It requires you to stop relying on noise and start listening to your intuition. And once you do, that inner voice gets louder, clearer, stronger. The moment you no longer fear losing people is the moment you gain your power. Because now your self-worth isn't tied to someone staying. It's tied to you showing up for yourself, fully, consistently, without guilt. That kind of strength is rare, but it's real. And it's built in solitude. Built in the quiet moments when you decide you won't break your own heart just to keep someone else comfortable. Being alone isn't about isolation. It's about alignment. It's about clearing space so the right people, the right energy, the right opportunities can find you. You're not pushing people away. You're protecting your peace. And that kind of protection is not selfish. It's necessary. Because a woman who knows her worth doesn't just survive, she rises. And she does it without waiting for permission, without asking for approval. Just her purpose, and a fire no one can extinguish. You begin to notice how peaceful life becomes when you no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You stop overthinking your decisions. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop apologizing for choosing yourself. Because the moment you realize your energy is sacred, you stop wasting it on people who don't honor it. Silence becomes your strength. Distance becomes your protection. And presence, your true powerful presence, becomes your message. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone. Not through words, not through struggle, not through sacrifice. Your worth is not up for debate. It's not dependent on who accepts you or who walks away. It's not something you earn by being everything for everyone. It's something you claim by being everything for yourself. That's what solitude teaches you. It strips away all the noise, all the expectations, all the illusions, and shows you the truth of who you are. And that truth is unshakable. It doesn't need attention to exist. It doesn't need validation to breathe. Once you become grounded in that truth, your standards shift. You no longer tolerate disrespect in any form, not from others, and not from yourself. You don't allow chaos to enter your space. You don't accept crumbs when you know you bring the whole table. That kind of self-awareness becomes your shield. It protects you from manipulation. It guards you from settling. It reminds you daily that peace is the prize. There's something so powerful about not reacting, about not letting someone's chaos disrupt your calm, about not letting temporary feelings create permanent damage. That level of self-control is built in silence. It's built when you sit alone and face your pain instead of distracting from it. And the more you do that, the stronger you get. Not louder, not harsher, just deeply, quietly, unshakably stronger. When you become deeply rooted in your own peace, you no longer feel the urge to explain your silence. You realize that not every absence needs an excuse. Not every distance needs a story. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remove yourself quietly from what no longer feels right. No announcement, no argument, just growth, just clarity, just strength and motion. That's the wisdom solitude gives you. It sharpens your awareness. You begin to see what once blinded you. You see the patterns, the energy shifts, the subtle disrespect you used to overlook, and you no longer tolerate what you used to excuse. You don't take it personally, you take it seriously, because now you respect your emotional space too much to let someone drain it. You've worked too hard to heal just to be pulled back into what broke you. There's a level of calm that comes when you stop reacting, when you stop rushing to fix, to prove, to be understood. You let people misunderstand you. You let them misjudge you. You let them create their version of the story. Because you're no longer interested in playing a part you've outgrown. Your silence is not weakness. It's maturity. It's growth. It's power that doesn't scream to be seen. This kind of strength confuses people who are used to control, who are used to access, who are used to the version of you that bent over backwards just to be accepted. But not anymore. Now you bend only for your values, for your peace, for your purpose. You've learned that it's not your job to shrink so others feel comfortable. It's your job to stand tall, even if you stand alone, because that kind of solitude doesn't break you, it builds you. It turns you into a woman who doesn't just survive the silence, she leads from it. The moment you stop seeking validation, you start attracting respect. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you're too focused on becoming your highest self to beg for approval. That shift is quiet, but it's powerful. It happens when you realize that self-worth doesn't come from who stays, who claps, or who notices. It comes from how deeply you honor yourself when no one's watching. There's something magnetic about a woman who is centered, who knows who she is, what she wants, and what she'll never settle for again. She's not cold, she's clear. She doesn't hate anyone, she's just unavailable for disrespect. Her life isn't about revenge or proving a point. It's about peace, growth, alignment. She's not competing with anyone. She's creating space for herself. And that presence, that inner calm, speaks louder than any words. People start to treat you differently when you treat yourself with intention, when you stop answering every message, when you stop showing up for everyone but yourself, when you stop betraying your boundaries for the sake of being liked, because now your time is sacred, your energy is protected, your heart is guarded, not in fear, but in wisdom. That's what solitude teaches you. It reminds you that you are enough even when no one is clapping, especially then. And in that quiet power, you begin to build a life that feels right to your soul. Not loud, not dramatic, just real, just steady, just deeply fulfilling. You stop chasing love and start becoming it. You stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself over and over again. That's where the transformation lives, in the small moments, in the quiet decisions, in the daily commitment to never abandon yourself again. Because now you know, the love you were searching for was never out there. It's been within you all along.